Hello, and welcome to the Science on the 7th live stream, a virtual space where we talk about topics related to air quality and health. I'm your host, Pallavi Pant, and this is a very interesting time to be talking about air quality, health, and even climate. Many of you are probably following the meetings happening in Dubai right now, the COP or the Conference of Parties, that happens annually to bring together negotiators, advocates, scientists, and others in one place and think about how we are addressing our climate problem. This year has been very important for one particular reason within the health community. On December 3rd, just a few days ago, we celebrated and acknowledged and observed for the first time a health day at the COP meeting. And we are seeing a very strong focus on the interconnection between climate and health, and air quality and addressing air pollution is coming up as an important issue within that climate and health nexus. And today I'm very excited to be welcoming our current HEI president, Dr. Elena Craft. She joined us a few months ago from EDF, where she's led work for many years on climate, health, air pollution, environmental justice, you name it. So welcome, Elena. Really excited to have you with us for this very last live stream of 2023.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. It's really great to be here.
Amazing. So I'm going to jump right in. You've sort of been at the forefront of work on climate and health for many, many years. And this year has been very interesting. We've seen wildfires and dust storms and heat waves that have highlighted for us how air quality and climate change are really interconnected. So as we continue to see, work that's happening at the COP around climate and health, what are your thoughts on this first day of health at COP and the efforts that have been underway for quite some time to make health a very integral part of this conversation? And where do you see this, moving?
Well, first off, I'm thrilled that there is a health day at COP. I think it's long overdue. I do think that it's a bit ironic that on the first health day, it actually happened on a day where there was actually poor air quality in Dubai. So particulate matter concentrations exceeded 155 microgram per meter cubed, which with regard to the air quality index is considered unhealthy, especially for sensitive subpopulations like asthmatics or the elderly. So I think it's high time to bring together climate and health in a way where we're not operating in silos, that we're actually working together. So I'm excited about the agreements that over 120 countries committed to, which was essentially prioritizing health in the context of climate. I think the writing has been on the wall for a long time in terms of not only the ecological impacts associated with climate, but also the massive health impacts as well. IPCC actually released a report recently showing that 3.6 billion people around the world are highly vulnerable to climate change. And they estimate that between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause an additional 250,000 deaths per year due to undernutrition, malaria, heat stress. As we know, as the heat rises around the world, that leads to increases in different types of pollution. We start seeing things like longer allergy seasons. We see increases in vector-borne diseases. We see increases in heat-related mortality. So there are just a number of health outcomes that are attributable to climate change. And so recognizing at the Conference of Parties this interaction, the nexus between climate and health, I think is an important first step for sure.
Yeah. You sort of make an excellent point about the writing having been on the wall for a long time. We've sort of heard and listened to stories about climate change impacting the polar bears. And I think Dr. Maria Neira from WHO at the Health Day, or just a couple of days after, said that this really is about them, but it's really about all of us, and it's about our health and what happens to the health of the future generations. So if we take a step back, you already started telling us a little bit about the ways in which this changing climate can be impacting our health. But what is it that's making us vulnerable to these impacts? And where is air quality an issue within this confluence of climate and health?
Well, I think the impact of a warming climate reverberates through, I mean, everything around the planet. So if you think about one of the health outcomes is this increase in food insecurity around the world. Well, why does that happen? Well, it happens because we see these droughts and these wildfires, and so we're not able to grow as much food as we need to feed the world's population. So there are all kinds of ways in which the impacts of climate change are seen in the health context. We talked a little bit about vector-borne diseases. We're seeing increases in dengue fever and malaria. There are more areas of the world that are susceptible to those kinds of outbreaks that we need to be concerned about. Obviously, the heat related mortality, as we see rising temperatures, we see rising concentrations of ozone, which is a ubiquitous air pollutant in many places around the world. Often in the US, we see hot spots for ozone pollution, and we know that has impacts in terms of those who are more susceptible with lung disease, with cardiovascular disease. And so it's not one way. There's not just one way in which a warming climate impacts health. It's really a multitude of ways. And there are ways in which, that we haven't even scratched the surface, I think, on the full implications of what, say, a 2-degree Celsius rise in temperature by 2050, what that will do in terms of our health. I will say that IPCC also, actually, this is a Lancet report, but they project that if there is that temperature rise of 2 degrees C by 2050, that heat-related deaths will increase by 370%. That's really astounding. And not only does it lead to death, but you also have to think about the economic impacts in terms of heat-related labor loss. So we have people who aren't able to work because it's too hot outside. So thinking about really the ramifications across all industries is important as we think about what do we do about this, and the urgency that I think is, that was what's demonstrated, I think, by the by this health day at COP, is really this recognition that this is an immediate critical problem. We need to do something now.
Yeah. And I think, you're sort of really talking about a whole spectrum of ways in which the warming climate is going to impact our health. And it sort of reminds me of this work that you've recently published with your EDF colleagues focusing on climate vulnerabilities. I think we have an image from the figure which sort of illustrates the many different ways in which our health is going to be impacted. Can you walk us a little bit through this, conceptually? I know this work was done in the context of, the US, but the vulnerabilities are going to be similar in other places. Here you talk about social and economic impacts. You talk about the health impacts. You also talk about infrastructure. So can you walk us through this a little bit? What went into coming up with this vulnerability index, and how can information and science like this be useful as we make decisions going forward?
Sure. So, this work is near and dear to my heart. I see that around the world, we're dealing with what I think of as everyone recognizes that there's a problem, that we need to do something about climate. But I think at the individual level, no one really understands, what can I do as an individual? I mean, if you think about this issue as a global one, what are the specific things that can encourage action, and encourage people to make changes that can help reduce climate pollution? And so part of the intention and underlying reason for developing the Climate Vulnerability Index was essentially to personalize climate in a way where people can understand the impact that it will have on their day-to-day lives. And so when we think about climate vulnerability, we have to think about all of those things, all of the elements, the criteria that factor into to what makes someone vulnerable to a warming climate. And that really ranges from health impacts, your baseline health, for example. If you're already susceptible, or if you have some sort of underlying disease, you are already more likely to experience a climate related health outcome than if you did not have some sort of uh, pre disease. And so also thinking about social and economic impacts, infrastructure, environment, extreme weather events. We've seen a amazing increase in terms of the number of extreme weather events and the cost of those events to society. There's also the social and economic indicators. So things like stress. How are we managing, understanding more about the implications of, will my home be insured because I live along the coast and sea level is projected to rise? And so now I can't afford the insurance that it will cost to protect my home. I mean, that leads to a number of different types of stress that are never really accounted for, I think, in a holistic way. And so the purpose of the Climate Vulnerability Index was really to bring all of that together. There, in total, there are 184 indicators that we pulled together to understand more about the what makes someone susceptible. It was done at the census tract level, so it's the most granular data available to look at this conglomeration of criteria, if you will. And in early October, we actually released a database that allows anyone to go in and do a query on the place where they live, or a region, or the whole nation, looking at individual elements of the index. So if you were just interested in, say, infrastructure, you could go in and do an analysis looking at how your region compared to the rest of the nation. And really the intention there is that that it would allow for people to understand more about what are the individual actions, community level actions, city level actions, regional level actions that could be done to try to mitigate some of that climate vulnerability. And the other thing that we wanted to do with this index was to highlight the resources that were made available recently through landmark legislation in the United States on the IIJA and the IRA. These were funds that came down to provide more resources for infrastructure around the country. And so with an index like this, you could actually use the data to make the case that, look, this region needs these infrastructure dollars because this region is more at risk than many other parts of the country. So it's a way to help identify where we could get the biggest bang for the buck, if you will, in terms of those investments. So there are a lot of reasons to pull together the data in this kind of an index. I think it's important to collect this information not only at the U.S. level but globally. We ran into a lot of issues with regard to how data were being collected, even state to state. So it's not without its challenges, but I think it provides a unique opportunity to compile and aggregate all of these criteria in one place, which I think it provides a really powerful tool, and one that allows you to have some robust scientific assessment in terms of your decision making.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's amazing, to hear about the thinking that sort of went into developing this index, but also, often we're talking about climate in terms of science, like what are the models predicting, where are we headed? But work like this can actually begin to connect it, as you said earlier, to people at where they are, what they're concerned about. And even in our last live stream, we had Dr. Wei Peng, who talked about personalizing information and talking about issues that concern them. So I think this is a great example of where we can start to pull at threads that people are really thinking about. And that sort of makes me think about another aspect of all of this, with the weather related extreme events becoming more frequent and sort of bigger and more important. People are also asking all kinds of questions. Like for wildfires, there's questions about what those peaks of exposures really mean when people are getting exposed to hundreds of micrograms of PM 2.5 and other pollutants in the air. Some of it gets transported over many, many thousands of miles, and what that means for other populations too. And as a scientific organization and as a scientist, I think we always try to think, well, what is the science here? What do we need to answer, and what's the time scale at which we need these answers, so that we can bring change at a scale that can help people. So from where you're sitting, and based on the work you've done in the past, what do you think are the big science questions, and how can we answer them in timescales that can help us and that are relevant for action now?
Well, that's a great question. I think the honest answer is we needed all of this information yesterday and years ago. So we're playing a bit of catch up, I think, in some ways. One of the things that I am trying to prioritize, and especially in my new role at HEI, is really understanding more about the climate health nexus. And so thinking about how we can partner, especially those within the environmental community, with those within the medical community. I mean, those are alliances, collaborations that we haven't explored as much as I think we should. And I think it's important to try to understand more about the integration of how climate change is going to impact someone's personal health. And one example that came up yesterday, actually, we were at a workshop on particulate matter, and it was focused on some of the wildfires that we experienced here in the United States this year. And the fact that the wildfires that were blowing in primarily from Canada were actually erasing, all of the air quality improvements that we've been working so hard to achieve for the last several decades. And so, how do we prevent backsliding into going into areas? I mean, if we're going to invest, billions of dollars into a clean energy transition, just to have that whittled away by smoke and wildfire smoke that's coming in from other places, or even here in the U.S., we haven't really gained anything because we're still having those health exposures. So thinking more about and in the context of mitigating that. So how do we address that? We had a couple of interesting conversations about how can we alert medical care professionals around these smoke events. And so thinking about okay, well, what is the action that is going to be recommended? A lot of folks brought up the questions around, well, my son or daughter has a soccer game today, and we see the wildfire smoke blowing in, and there's a yellow haze over the field. Do we play or do we not? And so I think all of those decisions really come down to how you feel about your personal health and what risk you want to take with regard to if you're a vulnerable person, if you have asthma or some underlying disease, then perhaps you make a different decision than someone else might. And so one of the things that I think is really important is really trying to marry more of the health with the environment, especially in the context of a warming climate, and understanding where the gaps are. What are those critical questions that we need to answer that will help people make better decisions to protect themselves? We also just at this recent workshop, it's top of mind, so I'm thinking about it. But the relationship between indoor air quality and outdoor air quality. If you do choose to stay inside because it's a bad air quality day, for example, are you better off inside if there's a smoker in the house? Or if you are burning, if you're using a wood burning stove, or if you're using a cook stove, all of these things, not as relevant maybe in the United States, but certainly in other parts of the world, and especially lower and middle income countries where those kinds of exposures inside the home may actually be contributing more to personal health, adverse health outcomes than what you might be experiencing outside. So I think there are just a lot of different threads to untangle here in terms of the context of understanding more about climate and health. And I, for one, am really excited about the future of this work and being able to make better decisions regarding climate and health.
Yeah, I think, the piece about indoor sort of air also being such a big contributor also just reminds me in, many places you talked earlier about sort of vector-borne diseases and, things like dengue fever becoming more sort of common in places that didn't exist. And even the, ways that people use to try and protect themselves from mosquitoes, like people use these coils and other types of chemicals to reduce bite mosquito bites. But what are the impacts as a result of that on pollutants that we may be breathing in? Big question mark in some places. So I think fascinating set of questions, and also I think questions that have a very critical relevance to people's decision making every day. And Health Effects Institute and us as an organization has always sort of thought about policy relevant science and science that will help move decision making forward. So with these types of questions looming around us, and also the organization thinking about what comes next in our next 5 years, what do you think are some pieces that we as an organization could be thinking about, and areas where we can do more work to help facilitate some of that evidence generation?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think understanding more about the clean energy transition is a key component of what I think we'll be doing over the next, 5 to 10 years. I think we see a massive shift in how we generate energy, the types of cars we drive, the decisions that we're making in terms of investments at larger scales, infrastructure build out with regard to there are tons of hydrogen hubs that have been planned around the country. What is the impact of that with regard to climate? I think uh, one thing that we want to make sure of as we think about the transition to a clean energy future is that we're not repeating issues of the past where we might see, there may be unintended consequences with regard to a shift in different types of energy generation. And so we want to understand more about, okay, well, what is the full implication of a build out of this new technology, or is this going to achieve the results that we want? I guess a classic example is, if we can sell as many electric vehicles as we want, if we don't have the infrastructure to support that, then that's not going to be help. That's not going to get us ultimately to the goal that we have, which is reducing emissions from the transportation sector. So not only thinking about the policy in and of itself, but actually the implementation and how effective that policy can be. It can only be effective if people follow follow it, and if it's feasible, right, for people to, I think, maintain the type of lifestyle that they have. And so thinking about and because our country is so large, right, there are different issues all over the place. So if you are living in the Midwest, it's probably harder for you to get an electric vehicle because you've got more miles to travel probably in
Right.
your day-to-day commute. And so I think thinking more deeply about how does this work in the context of whatever area or region that you're talking about, I think is really important. And one of the things that I see, us doing in the years ahead is trying to untangle some of those questions around what are the full implications, even on the mining side. I mean,
Mhm.
what are the implications of mining to build out the battery power and energy that we need to supply a clean energy future?
Right.
Thinking about that,
Mhm.
I do think also, on the wildfires are really interesting, right? Because one of the mitigation measures to prevent wildfires is actually prescribed burning. Well, I mean, that's actually creating smoke and some of the same issues, right? So
Right.
thinking about translating, how do we communicate the need for maybe some of
Mhm.
those policy mitigation efforts to, in the context of, okay, well, we need to do this to prevent, further exacerbation of an already difficult problem. So
Yeah.
thinking about research translation. And I don't want to leave out environmental justice implications as well. I mean, I think
Mhm.
obviously for hundreds of years, there have been certain uh, uh, populations around in areas around the country where specific people have borne the brunt of the technology transition, right? So the build out of these facilities and those unintended consequences don't happen equally or equitably across the population. Oftentimes, it's in those who are lower socioeconomic status,
Yeah.
in places where they're already more vulnerable because they're in a food desert, or uh, they don't have access to healthcare facilities, any number of reasons. And so thinking about how do we prioritize and make sure that whatever we do moving forward is done in a way where we're not picking winners and losers in terms of the populations, especially those who are most vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that's going to keep us plenty busy for the next many years. So as we come to a close on this, really fascinating discussion, I think I want to take a slightly different question really quickly, which is often, people that come on this live stream have had really interesting pathways into the work that they've done, very interesting motivations. And I've always really enjoyed hearing about their journeys. And in your case, you trained as a toxicologist. You've been working with, really impressive interdisciplinary teams over the last several years. And I just want to hear what your journey has been like and what gives you hope to wake up every day and, continue work on issues related to climate and air quality and health.
Well, Yeah, I guess I get the most important thing is that I've had fun along the way. I enjoy this work immensely, and I think there's something about doing work that is meaningful and impactful in the world. And I think especially as you get older, you understand, it's not just about me. I think probably many of us feel differently when we're in our, teens and early 20s and so forth. But once you, I think, mature a bit and understand, look, I have something to contribute. I have something that I think can help make the world a better place. It's important to try to grow those skills and that expertise that you have, and to deploy it in ways that are helpful and useful for society at large. And so I've been fortunate enough along the way to have opportunities to work with some of our top scientists around the nation. Um, and just being interested in the work. And yes, you have to put in, the blood, sweat, and tears, right? Sometimes of getting through graduate school or volunteering. My first job was actually volunteering at EPA. That was really life changing in many ways because I got a lot of experience. You think you get out of school and you're just going to hop into a great job with tons of money. And it's like, no, no, no. You need to really have the real world experience of, okay, I've got this specific skill. And so I think that's pretty much what I've done along the way is try to take advantage of opportunities, even if I knew, hey, I'm going to have to do this for a little while. It's not where I want to be in long term, but I understand that I'm going to be learning a skill set that will eventually help me down the road. And so I think recognizing those opportunities and taking the time to pursue those, and then also maintaining networks and collaborations and talking with other smart people who are committed and wanting to do the same thing. And so I think I'm inspired by lots of people every day, including our HEI staff. I think everyone is really ambitious. They want to make a difference. They want to understand the science in ways that it can be most useful for how we develop our best policies. And then making sure that those policies are successful in achieving what we set them out to do. I think accountability is a key part of anything that we do. It's not just getting the policy out there is not the finish line, right? The finish line is it achieving what we had hoped when we envisioned it in the first place. So yes, I have lots of thoughts on that, and I will
Yeah.
yeah, but I just I'm really grateful for the opportunity to lead HEI. It's kind of a dream job, and I'm just really looking forward to working with our incredible set of scientists and staff to do all the things that we know need to be done to make the world a better place.
No, that's wonderful to hear. And I think this notion of like working and getting the experiences when you can is so important. I feel like I've had a very similar experience through my career, and this is a really good opportunity to plug this excellent summer fellowship program that HI started last year. I think we're posting links to more information. So if you are a professor, a researcher, a practitioner, and you want to help train the new generation of scientists, please take a look. And if you are one of those, early career people trying to get more experience, then please watch out for applications coming in. Alina, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I think what I'm hearing from you is both sort of, the urgency and the need for us to be thinking about climate and health together, the need for personalizing and bringing the science and the information to people and in terms of issues that matter to them, and also really thinking about the big scientific questions that can help us continually improve people's health, improve the air quality, and improve the environment in which they live and work. So thank you for your commitment to this work, and thank you for joining us at HEI. Looking forward to continuing all of this work with you. And Anyone who's listening in, thank you so, so much. This was our last live stream for 2023. We will be taking a break in January and planning and brainstorming what to do for the rest of the year. So join us on February 7th, 2024, when we will be back with new episodes, new guests. Until then, we hope that you have a wonderful, joyful, festive season with your loved ones. And thank you for all of your support to Science on 7th and HEI. Goodbye.